All right, what is up, YouTube? Hello. Welcome into a live show from my bedroom. I've changed up the arrangement here, trying to make it a little more audio friendly as I continue to try and get this audio figured out for you to make it sound a little bit clearer and a little bit better. But to be honest, I'm not sure that it does. I don't really care. I've got a lot of things going on right now, man. There are so many things happening that I want to talk about. Obviously, we have the brackets revealed, right? We know where everybody in the Big 12 is going. So we're definitely going to talk some Big 12 brackets. We had the Big 12 tournament, which quite honestly was a little bit of a letdown, not the most fun tournament in the world, and Kansas won. Okay. Congratulations. How many times have we seen that? I do want to talk about Kansas's draw. I think that's something very important and pertinent to the Big 12. Certainly Baylor's draw on the opposite end of the spectrum. Oklahoma gets left out of the NCAA tournament. Should the Sooners have actually been in? What about Texas Tech? I see Allen coming in with a Wreckham already. I'm sure Red Raider fans have plenty of thoughts on their bracket and where they stand. And I did see some interesting analytical information on that front as well. So we're going to dive all in. Look, it's March Madness. The brackets are out. I know most of the time I stay football focused here on this channel. That doesn't mean there will be no football today. I have a little bit, and I guess this is really basketball related too, but I've got information on Big 12 divisions. They were discussed. Remember, the Big 12 ADs were all together at the Big 12 tournament this weekend. So divisions were discussed. And I've got a little bit of info on that front. So I know we've had that divisions conversation many a time before, but we'll do it a little bit again tonight. Most of this, though, is going to be basketball focused because, look, my brain actually is there right now. Which it hasn't been very much, but there's been a ton happening in the K-State world. I'm in the midst of a coaching search here. There is nothing more exciting as a sports fan than coaching search season, right? When your school is in the midst of a coaching search, things become pretty lively and pretty fun. Alan asks, who is the hot name for K-State basketball? It is one and only person, Brad Underwood. Brad Underwood is what my life has revolved around for the last 72 hours. He is a K-State alum. He is the head coach at Illinois. He both played and coached at K-State, has long said that K-State is his dream job. Now is the opportunity to come take it and leave the pressure cooker that is Illinois, and also a place where he does not have a very good relationship with his athletic director. So, yes, I know there will be plenty of people here who just take one look at that and say, why would the guy who just won the Big Ten 2 years in a row want to leave Illinois with Chicago in his backyard in his hip pocket and go to K-State? Well, it's a great question. It's because he doesn't like the AD. Illinois is a pressure cooker job, unrealistic expectations, and he does love K-State. It is his home. Think West Virginia and Bob Huggins when he made that move to go home. That's the pitch. That's the hope. And I can just tell you there's legitimate smoke to it. Now, whether or not it actually happens and whether or not Brad Underwood truly does want it at the end of the day is another thing, but there is some legitimate smoke here. And that is encompassing my world because it would be a home run hire that would heal the wounds of a fan base that went through a decade of being very divided over Bruce Weber. As much success as he did have at times as the head coach at K-State, this has been a very divided, fractured fan base that desperately needs something like this to happen, and it would be crazy. It would be crazy. Now, Ford Fastback says Brad Underwood doesn't like any AD. He's trouble. That is true. Now, then this is look, I'm going through a wide range of emotions as I get more information by the hour on what's happening with all of this. It's been pretty crazy. But one of the things that is a fear for me is that K-State is getting used a little bit here for a raise. We've seen Underwood do that. We've seen Underwood not get along with athletic directors, up and leave just like that. I mean, he did have a quote earlier today where he was asked about the K-State job, and he certainly did not deny it. I thought that quote very much left the door wide open. But honestly, I would think Underwood would do that no matter what because that's kind of his style. He's a guy that grinded for a long time at the lower levels, was a JUCO head coach, and now I think has finally gotten his comeuppance and is like, hey, I'm going to take what's here for me. That's the general impression and the attitude that I get from Underwood. So it very well could be K-State being used for a raise. Who knows? But there is legitimate smoke right now to at least it being on the table and a legitimate possibility. Baylor fans, I'm hearing right now that Jerome Tang is number 2 candidate right now on K-State's board. I think Grant McCaslin may be out. We'll see, but he's the head coach at North Texas. That was another name I was hearing a lot at first. So K-State fans, I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions about it. If there are K-State fans popping in here at this point, feel free to ask throughout the show. I'll try to get to what I can. We'll talk about everything else going on in the Big 12 and the NCAA tournament, whatever questions you have. You guys know how to do this. You can click the $ below the chat box where it says say something to get your question or comment to me. It will supersede everything else in the chat and pop up to my eyeballs first. So it ensures that your topic, your question or comment will get discussed. And also, you get a chance to support the work that I'm doing here on this channel for you, bringing you more Big 12 content. So appreciate all of you guys who do that every single week. You can also like the video, and that's a way that you can help me out without spending a single dime. You don't have to take a dime out of your pocket. You can just like the video right now, and that does help me, helps with the algorithm, helps drive the views up. All of that is much appreciated as well. Do I have any other announcements for you? If you are watching this not live and you want to donate and contribute to the channel, it's John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you'd like to support the channel that way as well. And look, Daddy bought some new shoes today. So, we gotta hop on the YouTube and make a little money tonight. Just kidding. Not about the shoes. I did buy some shoes, though. I'm very excited for it. Matt, I appreciate the donation. Matt, he says, Underwood to K-State. I'm for it. A strong K-State is good for the Big 12. Wreckham from Texas Tech. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Really appreciate that. The well wishes, the donation, all of it. I was pulling hard for your Red Raiders, obviously, in the Big 12 championship game yesterday. I was hoping that you guys could get it done. I gave a little shout out to my guys at the Gambling Gauchos over that one. But, hey, it is what it is, man. Kansas is going to do that to a lot of people in that building. In the artist formerly known as Sprint Center. They're going to do that to a lot of people. I still think Tech is in a pretty good spot. And I see Matt also asked, do you think Texas Tech can make a Final Four? I like their matchup versus Duke. I think Tech can beat Duke, sure, absolutely. And I did see there was one computer projection that already had Tech with the second best odds to make it out of that region. So I don't think it's impossible at all. I don't think it's impossible at all for Tech to get there. And, I mean, look, we're talking about, I know it's easy to look at that and say, oh, Duke versus Texas Tech. Okay, you have one program that's, used to being in those high-level games, used to being in those situations. And before you say one that's not, let's look at the recent history of Texas Tech here. National championship game and an Elite Eight all in the last 5 years. This is a team and a program that knows how to win in the postseason, man. I'm here for it. Mark Madness. Are we doing Mark Madness, or was it Markness? I don't know. Whatever the pun is that you Tech fans are going with. For Mark Adams and March Madness. I'm here for it. I'll be pulling hard for the Red Raiders. So we can kind of go through blow by blow here, what each team and program got as a draw in general for the Big 12, getting the 6 teams in. Iowa State clearly was pretty close to being out of the field, at least relatively close, being that they landed as an 11 seed, but honestly, kind of a gift, right? Iowa State winds up with LSU, who's going through the firing of their head coach, Will Wade, and just a lot of drama happening with LSU basketball right now. That's actually a pretty good draw, I would think, for the Clones if you're going to be an 11 seed. So Oklahoma getting left out is going to be the controversial piece here for the league, unless you want to really hammer the committee for giving Baylor a pretty tough draw with what they have. But I think the main thing worthy of discussion here is what happened to Oklahoma. So I had a tweet pulled up. I think I screwed up and went away from it. But my guy Todd Lisenby was comparing the resumes of Rutgers and Oklahoma, which would, to me, that's the one that does bother me. Yeah, here it is. So Oklahoma had a net of 40. Rutgers had a net of 77. That's supposed to be one of the big tools used now, right? Oklahoma with a net of 40. Rutgers with a net of 77. Oklahoma with a strength of schedule of 5. Strength of schedule of 26 for Rutgers. RPI 68 for Oklahoma, 89 for Rutgers. Ken Palm, Oklahoma's 30. Rutgers is 74. 74 in Ken Palm. Oklahoma had 10 quad 1 wins. Rutgers had 9. So there's not really a single piece of the Rutgers resume that is better than Oklahoma. So Sooner fans, I feel for you, man. Sooner fans, I feel very, very bad for you. If that's who's getting in front of you, that's tough. And especially after, look, Oklahoma had a huge win. They knocked off Baylor at the Big 12 tournament, but it does seem like the committee, at least if you're reading into what happened with Texas A&M, was not putting much value this year on making a run in your conference tournament. So that is kind of one of the takeaways to me is the committee looked at what Oklahoma did. The committee looked at what A&M did and said don't really care so much. So with that, I feel bad for the Sooners. I still think Oklahoma's program is in pretty good shape. I think Oklahoma still made a good hire with Porter Mosier. I would not be panicking if I were anybody in Norman, but that's a bummer and that's a blow because you're definitely right there on the bubble. And hey, I mean, I guess it's not totally over. I did think it was funny that we're talking about teams being on like COVID standby here, right? So Oklahoma is on the COVID standby list. If somebody is going to have COVID issues and get whacked out of there, Oklahoma could still jump back into the field. So, I mean, I guess there's that. I guess you just hope for some COVID, which sounds terrible to say, but that's the position that Oklahoma fans are in right now. So, look, I would fight for you, Sooners. I would defend your honor. The Big 12 was a very tough league this year. I would have put them in over Rutgers, certainly. I think Oklahoma was a deserving team. At the end of the day, though, this is somewhat a reflection on I don't know if saying the Big 12 was overrated is a little too strong, but some of the Big 12 love got a little over the top there for a while, where at the beginning of conference play, like early January, mid-January, we were talking about like, is the Big 12 going to get like 8 teams in, 9 teams? Like this might be the best league in the history of the – and I do feel like some of that happens every single year. Like Big 12 coaches just love propping up the league at every single turn. And I think there was a ton of that going on. And as the season wore on, I mean, we started to see some teams like sink back to the bottom, like West Virginia, K-State. Oklahoma State, I guess, was fairly irrelevant in this discussion with the no postseason thing. But then Oklahoma as well. You could see some of the cream starting to rise. So in some ways, a reflection on the Big 12 just being a good league, like it always is a good league, but not some otherworldly good league like we thought that it was toward the beginning of the year, toward the beginning of conference play. Check the chat here. See, we got Chad in here stirring it up. Michael says OU was right to be left out, not a good team. Well, look, I would say if you put yourself in the position that Oklahoma did, I mean, they certainly left the committee plenty of reason to leave them out as well. I'm not saying that it's like a slam dunk for Oklahoma, but when you start comparing resumes and you go blow by blow, it's hard to look at their resume compared to Rutgers and say that Rutgers was actually the more deserving team. So there is a case here. But yes, if you want to really like break it down, is Oklahoma a great basketball team? No. And did they – but it's that way with the bubble every single year. Now with 68 teams, like the bubble's weaker and weaker. So we're going to have arguments about teams that, you know, a lot of people would look at and say, this isn't actually a very good team. So there's a part of that comes with the discussion every single year. Don, appreciate that donation a ton. Don with a extremely generous donation. Don says, can't stay. We'll watch later. Thank you, Coach Weber. Also looking forward to the next chapter in a proud K-State basketball tradition. Who are your top 3 in our coaching search? Go Cats. Don, I feel like I should give you like a top 33 for that donation, but thank you so much for that. And yes, let me say this, because Bruce Weber is a big part of this. Bruce Weber stepped down, but basically what happened there is K-State giving him the dignity of stepping down instead of being fired, which is what was happening. He just went through a stretch where they finished 9th, 10th, 9th in the Big 12. Not good enough at K-State, not good enough at almost anywhere. You're going to get fired at a lot of Power 5 jobs for doing that, even if you have 2 Big 12 championships and an Elite 8 in your tenure there at that school. So it was coming. I think Bruce was probably fortunate that he got this extra year, this 3rd year. I think a lot of athletic directors would have pulled the trigger sooner. And there was a lot of drama that came out of that. Bruce Weber went and did a final press conference that I think K-State was hoping or had been under the impression would not be what it was. Instead, it was Bruce Weber throwing the fan base, the school, a lot of people under the bus, and I didn't think it was the greatest look on the way out the door, and hinted at a lot of the insecurities that Bruce Weber has and had that plagued him for a long time. Also was treated very unfairly by the fan base at the same time. I will recognize that as well. There was a protest the day that he was hired. A small one, but there was a protest outside of his introductory press conference the day he was hired. So it was just never a strong marriage between fan base and coach. So there was a lot that happened there. And at the end of the day, as somebody that hated the hire at first and definitely was tired of the last 3 years and wanted to see new blood in here, I also very much do appreciate the accomplishments that he had. High highs that this program had not seen since the 60s and 70s with the 2 Big 12 titles and an Elite 8 run. Frank Martin had an Elite 8 run too as well, but you get the point. There were some really high highs with Bruce, some really low lows. At the end of the day, I will just say, like, look, we should all be able to be respectful about this and say thank you for what you accomplished. It was certainly time to move on. I think that's the right take here. And it seems like, Don, you're in the same place there. I think you are in the same place there. And it feels like that's where most K-State fans are. You still have the haters. You still have the guy running around with a bye-bye Bruce sign at the West Virginia game on Wednesday at Sprint Center. Like, you have people that will not handle it with grace and, rooted for their prediction to be right for 10 years and don't like the way Bruce speaks, which he certainly can put his foot in his mouth and say goofy, weird things and is not the most dynamic communicator in the world. And there are all these things, right? But at the end of the day, I think you do need to respect him for what he accomplished and just move on to the next phase. It's pretty easy to do because it's pretty exciting right now. The other part of Don's question here was about the candidates for the K-State job right now. And as I said earlier at the outset, obviously Brad Underwood is number one, and K-State is chasing him. There is legitimate smoke to it. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but there is legitimate smoke to it. And right now it's just the updates to me come pretty fast and furious, and one thing can lead you in one direction, one thing can lead you in another. And it toys with my emotions. Look, I mean, I'm a huge fan, and I want this desperately. I want this badly. A part of why Underwood resonates so much beyond the obvious, what his resume is and his accomplishments the last few years. And not just that. I mean, how great he was at Stephen F. Austin, had a really nice year at Oklahoma State. Beyond just those accomplishments, he was a player at K-State under arguably the most beloved and best coach K-State ever had in Jack Hartman back in the glory days of K-State basketball. And then when he was a coach, when I was in school, he was on Frank Martin's staff and was a key part in turning K-State into a winner for the first time in my lifetime, like first time for a generation of fans. So there is a very strong bond there. I also think that, as strong of a bond as there was between K-State fans and Frank Martin, Frank had run his course a little bit by the end of it, and I can kind of admit that now, where the yelling and screaming, like I'm not sure that was resonating quite. Brad Underwood was he can be like a dialed back Frank. Still brings that toughness, still brings that identity. He's definitely a tough SOB, but dialed down like a notch or two from what the crazy Frank Martin was at the end of that. So it feels like it's one of ours. It's a guy that brings the personality and the brand that you would want. He's not going to step all over himself and put his foot in his mouth at press conferences. He's going to give you all of those different things, and kind of harkens back to Frank Martin, who's a guy that had an unbelievable bond with the fan base. And that's why people were so upset when he was run off by John Curry as the athletic director. And that started Bruce down the wrong path, where everybody hated him for 10 years. Not everybody, but a lot of people. You get the idea. There are so many reasons why Brad Underwood would be a perfect home run hire right now. And that's why my emotions are very tied to this. Everybody's really living and dying with it at the moment. I do believe that as of right now, I would float the idea that Jerome Tang may be number two, who is an assistant with Baylor, who's been with Scott Drew for a long time. Another former Baylor guy, Grant McCaslin, I thought would get a lot of run for this job, the North Texas head coach. And he did have his team scored 36 points and got bounced in the Conference USA tournament, which was surprising. I don't know that had a ton to do with what happened here, but I also am not sure at this point that he is really getting much run for the K-State job. So Tang, Underwood, and then outside of that, I wish that K-State would consider Chris Mack pretty heavily. I'm a pretty big proponent of Chris Mack being somebody that K-State should really look at for this job, but I don't know that that's really happening. I've not heard a lot about that, just a little teeny tiny bit. But like Chris Mack, he went to 5 Sweet 16s in 9 years at Xavier, made the tournament 8 of those 9 years, was in the tournament 1 year at Louisville, would have been the COVID year, and then obviously had this last year where things fell apart and it got weird and he was out. But if you're talking about resume, track record, a guy that doesn't have a buyout because he's a free agent and a fired coach right now, I would take a serious look at Chris Mack. He was also on the opposite side of K-State's most iconic NCAA tournament game of all time, the double overtime win in the Sweet 16 over Xavier with Jacob Pullen. That was the second year for Chris Mack at that time when he was the head coach at Xavier. So a little bit of symmetry there, right? It just makes sense to get him back on the sideline in Manhattan. That would be my number two, and I'm open to Tang. I really am. I think K-State likes a lot of head coaching experience here generally, but it sounds like Jerome Tang has moved his way up the board even without that. It's an interesting situation because he's been with Drew for so long. Why did he never leave to take a head coaching job before? Are we overreacting too much to a national championship last year where he's now getting all this shine and all this attention? I don't know. It's that's a hard one for me to tell, but I like Texas ties. I like Big 12 connections. I like knowing the landscape. I love Scott Drew. You guys know how much I love Scott Drew. I think he's a phenomenal coach, and I've thought that for years, way before it was cool. Way before it was cool. Honestly, when it was uncool, I thought that. So that to me seems to be where it sits. Medved at Colorado State had been mentioned some. He got an extension. And frankly, I wasn't really very excited about that one anyway. So, like, that's another name. Beyond the names I've already rattled off, we're getting pretty speculative here. I can say, and I think someone asked about the timeline. Yeah, Ryan asked about the timeline. Says, when do you think this will be wrapped up? K-State is going to need this to move fast. So here's the thing. K-State, I think, saw how many jobs opened all of a sudden. It was like half of the SEC fired their coaches within the last 48 hours. So it went from, okay, K-State doesn't have a ton of competition to deal with here to, oh, wow, Mizzou, LSU, Georgia, which I guess now you flop Georgia for Florida with Mike White leaving to go to Georgia from Florida. So now you have more competition. There's more that you're going to have to contend with, more that you're going to have to deal with, meaning coaches could be off the board. I know, like, Tang has been mentioned at Missouri as well. So if that's your number two, you'd have to be looking at Brad Underwood like, man, we're going to need an answer. And that all of a sudden becomes very tricky. And I do, by the way, firmly believe, like, K-State will make an offer. Brad Underwood will listen to said offer, and Brad Underwood will make a decision. And I would believe that is probably going to happen before Illinois actually plays an NCAA tournament game. The tough part will be then if it's a yes, well, you got to keep that quiet. Like, you got to keep that bleep quiet. Like, I would assume it just goes radio silent on K-State's end, because you can't – there can be no leaks. There can be no leaks if that happens, because all of a sudden, if that comes out while he's still playing in the NCAA tournament, like, that could torpedo the whole thing, not only Illinois season, but the whole thing if this were actually to happen. So, like, this is why, like, this is pretty stressful. It's fun, exciting, but it's also it's very stressful. Very stressful for your boy here at the moment, because, look, I've grown pretty apathetic with K-State basketball over the last 3 years. When I was in school, I had awesome K-State hoops. The peak of the Frank era. It was great, and I would love dearly to go back to that and feel some of that excitement. And honestly, I look at what's happening, Texas Tech fans. I look at what's happening with you guys. I was having a conversation over the weekend with some of my buddies who were in school with me at the time when K-State went on their run under Frank. And I was like, man, Tech is going through that same resurgence right now, just on a higher level. I mean, they won at a higher level, getting to the national championship game and then another Elite Eight there. Obviously, Tech has done this at a higher level than what was happening then. But it just so reminds me of that, where it's this revitalization. The atmosphere is nuts. It's insane. Everybody cares so deeply about it. It's showing off what a great fan base it can be. K-State did that at one point in time. It's not there anymore, and I want it back very, very badly. So I'm hoping like hell that this comes through. So if you guys have any good vibes, any good juju out there to send our way, that would be wonderful. It'd be fantastic and much, much appreciated. If you want to donate like Don did, thank you very much, Don. I hope I gave you enough time there on the K-State coaching search right now to whet your appetite for that donation. If you want to be like Don and donate, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something, and it is always much appreciated. I see BU Bear. I was hoping some Baylor fans would hop in on this. BU Bear says McCaslin's is a winner at everywhere he's been. Yeah, I was pretty high on McCaslin, and honestly, like, I was a little disappointed that that it sounds to me. I was just told today that it sounds to me like the things have cooled there. That's probably not going to be a fit. I'd really wrap my mind around McCaslin being a pretty good candidate. I mean, when this started, I thought that would be the number 2 choice for me. Now it's kind of moved up to Mac and then probably Tang at number 3. BU Bear, if you have any insight on Tang, I'm here for it. Give me some insight on Jerome Tang, and I would absolutely be here for it. Bryson, John, I'm guessing you are, but you subscribed to KSO. Yeah, man. I don't mean to. Well, I'm not laughing at you. I chuckle there because Derek Young is one of my very good friends. I hung out with Derek Young twice this weekend. Actually, we watched some Big 12 basketball together on a couple of occasions. Did a podcast with him the other day. If you want to hear me and him, all of our thoughts on the K-State opening, go follow my Twitter feed. You can find that. So yeah, DY is one of my good friends. So I'm very much in the KSO. The KSO circle. Sam, more grievance clickbait. Yeah, well, here's the deal. The grievance has already been covered as far as the tournament goes, and that was, I thought, Oklahoma being left out. The other grievance here, if you're the Big 12, and again, if you want to change this up, you want to talk something different, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something to donate and get your question or comment up to the top. But the other beef that you could have here, I think, is if you are a Baylor fan. I mean, look, you're a 1 seed. It's in essence the third straight year for Baylor. You count the COVID year where they would have been a 1 seed as well. But if we're going to compare the draws that Baylor and Kansas got here, like, woof, Baylor gets North Carolina as the 8 seed. Yes, the North Carolina that just spoiled Coach K's final home game ever at Cameron Indoor. Kentucky is the 2. UCLA is the 4. Purdue the 3. But, man, like having the potential of North Carolina waiting for you there in the second round just to get to the second weekend is tough. UCLA, I think, is a very good team. Kentucky, obviously, you never want to see them as your 2 if you're a 1. That's a pretty difficult draw. I'm not going to sit here and say that Baylor deserved a better draw than Kansas because, look at what happened in the conference tournament. Kansas, I think, certainly earned that. But you compare their draw to Baylor's. Let's go down here. Kansas is the top seed with San Diego State, and Creighton is the 8-9 game. Okay. San Diego State, Creighton, the 4 and the 5 is Providence and Iowa. Are Providence and Iowa really scaring you? And the odds of both of them advancing on, these days seem very low. Like a 12 or a 13 seems to be multiple that win every single tournament. I guess Iowa certainly is dangerous. Like I can see how you would be a little fearful of Iowa, I suppose. But Wisconsin is the 3 and Auburn is the 2. Like I just don't. Auburn to me feels kind of like a paper tiger. I don't feel great about Auburn's shot there to beat Kansas if it were to come to fruition that they would play. So I don't know if you're KU, I think you feel incredible about that draw. And there's actually some numbers to back that up, or a number that really backs that up. Now, this will depend on how much you subscribe to the Bible of KenPom, right? I tend to lean more towards subscribing to the Bible of KenPom than not. So if you are on the other side of that, you may roll your eyes at this. But if you just add up the rankings of all the KenPom teams of the top 4 seeds in each region, okay? So if you are a team in that region, you'd want this number to be higher because it means that the teams around you were basically lower in the KenPom rankings. The West, they total 42. Top 4 seeds total 42. In the South, the top 4 seeds total 37. In the East, the top 4 seeds total 30. In the Midwest, Kansas's bracket, the top 4 seeds total 99. 99. So from 42 to 99, that's the gap. And that tells you just how, I guess, disrespected those teams are by KenPom. If you buy into the advanced analytics, they do not think very highly at all of the other top seeds in Kansas's region. So, look, the Jayhawks probably deserve some of that. They're playing really good basketball right now. I'm a KU hater, right? I'm a K-State fan, but I can't take anything away from what they did in Kansas City. It looked really good. And Remy Martin is starting to play a lot better, and I think that's going to be one of the keys here. If Kansas really is going to take this thing deep into the tourney, they're going to go deep with a run. They'll probably need some Remy Martin. And I think in the Big 12 championship game, he was really key. When Kansas started to falter a little bit, Remy Martin really he was an X factor. And he was, that guy was straight up bad for a lot of this year. When watching him play, it was the first game in Manhattan against K-State. Remy Martin looked awful. So to have him come around, a guy who was the preseason Big 12 Player of the Year, one of the most high-profile transfers in the country, makes a big difference. If I'm a Kansas fan, that's what no notes, no complaints here on everything that happened at T-Mobile Center, and then everything that happened in their draw, the bracket that they actually got. So I think odds-on favorite to get to the Final Four from the Big 12 would be Kansas for sure. Baylor, tougher read for me again because of the draw, because of, what's happened to them here in the back half of the season where they've been a little bit more up and down. Was not expecting at all the loss that they had to Oklahoma, although that game clearly meant more to Oklahoma with the Sooners fighting for their tournament lives. I suppose I could cut Baylor a little bit of slack there, but Texas Tech, looking here, I'll be honest, I'm not going to try and fake to you guys like I know anything about Montana State basketball in 2022, but that's Texas Tech's first round matchup where they'll take on Montana State. The 6 being Alabama. Look, maybe this is just too blatant disrespect for SEC basketball. Nate Oates is fun. Alabama's fun, but I think that's a very winnable game for Tech. You're telling me Texas Tech basically in the round of 32 for a trip to the second weekend could just be playing a neutral site like Big 12 SEC Challenge game here, because that's what it's like. Kentucky, Tennessee, and then pretty much everybody else, where it's like everybody else kind of seems to fit the same sort of profile for me in the SEC. A lot of athletes, a lot of fun, but not always the most rock solid, especially come tournament time. I would take that all day and on Sunday if I were Texas Tech. So I think Tech has to be pretty pleased with that draw. Now, if they get to Duke, then I mean, that's tough. And I know someone asked me, a Tech fan asked me earlier in the chat, like, what do you think of their chances against Duke? I can't give you a total detailed breakdown on that game, I suppose, but Duke clearly is not invincible, judging by what happened. I mean, if they can't win Coach K's final home game against their arch rivals who were just an 8-9, like in an 8-9 game here, then they are very much beatable. But it's also not, you can't sit there and be like, well, guaranteed. Like that's obviously going to be a W for Texas Tech. I think the point is, if you get to that game, you're going to be playing a high-level basketball game. Can Texas Tech win high-level basketball games? Absolutely, yes, they can. I watched Texas Tech lose in overtime in Allen Fieldhouse. I watched them also beat Kansas. I watched them. What was it? They went 5-1 against Texas, Kansas, and Baylor this year in the regular season. So I guess 5-2 overall if you want to lump in the Kansas tournament loss. That's a team that can win high-level games. Absolutely. So can they beat Duke? Absolutely they can. It would not be easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I think they can. And if I were Tech, I would be focused here on playing to your seed line, getting to the second weekend, and then see what happens then. That, I think, is how you have to approach it. Tech has been a second weekend program here recently. And Mark Adams certainly looks like all gas, no brakes on that front. Like, not somebody who's going to be slowing down anytime soon with that. So I would feel pretty good about that. I mentioned Iowa State. I think if you're going to be an 11 and you're going to have to squeak in as an 11 to this thing, getting LSU with the distractions going on with a fired head coach, I don't know that it gets much better than that. I would be dancing in the streets there if I were Iowa State. Playing Wisconsin, I mean, who cares? You're an 11 seed, make it, go win that game, and go take your shot against Wisconsin. That game might be a game that is played in the 20s if Wisconsin and Iowa State play, judging by some of the offensive struggles that Iowa State has had and obviously the reputation that precedes Wisconsin there. Haven't talked at all about TCU. TCU Seton Hall is interesting to me. I've just had such a hard time coming around on TCU because early in the year, I considered it such a bitterly disappointing loss when K-State had them beat in Manhattan and just threw the game away in the last couple of minutes. They just didn't stick out to me as a team that really brought a ton to the table at that point in time. I just thought they were very average, so it's hard for me to escape this feeling of TCU is kind of blah, and I know that that's not really fair to them at this point in the year based on their resume and what they've done. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't see TCU beating Arizona. I don't see TCU being capable of being a second weekend kind of a team, but still a really nice year for TCU, a really nice year for Jamie Dixon, especially with his contract situation coming up. I think that that works out pretty well for him with what they've done this year. Who are we missing? Who am I missing? Oklahoma gets left out. We got Iowa State. We got TCU. We got KU Baylor. We got Texas Tech. I think that's a pretty good summation of the bracket right now for all these Big 12 teams, right? We'll see what happens here. I mean, the Big 12, I talked a little bit of smack. By the way, Jay Rodriguez, appreciate the donation. He said, just wanted to say, go Cougs. All right, well, there you go. Go Cougs. Thank you, Jay Rodriguez. I talked a little bit of smack, or at least talked down a little bit on the Big 12 earlier. Hey, this league was overhyped in early January with what the conversation was surrounding it. Well, they've got a chance to go prove it now. You got a chance to go prove it. Clearly, you have the star power at the top with Baylor and Kansas. There is plenty of that. Oh, I know who we didn't talk about. How could I forget? We didn't talk about Texas. Here's my conundrum with Texas. Texas and Virginia Tech, to me, screams. My gut reaction is that screams big fat L for Texas. Chris Beard, who I have more on in just a moment. But Chris Beard goes out with a whimper in Kansas City, where he has not been very good. Even at Texas Tech, he was not very good in the Big 12 tournament. He's 1-5, right? I believe the record is 1-5 in the Big 12 tournament. Beard takes another loss, goes into the tournament against a red-hot Virginia Tech team that just ripped through the ACC tournament, won the ACC title, and they're sitting there as your 11. I would hate that. hate that if I were Texas. And my gut reaction, my initial reaction is to say, like, of course, Vautech is the favorite there. However, I do feel like the team that gets scorching red hot wins the conference tournament that's not like a 1 or a 2, like a team that's already expected to be up there. Typically, they fall apart. Like, typically, they become a darling and people have them going really far in the tournament, and then you see them fall apart. I can remember it happening to Florida State not that long ago, where they wind up as like a 3 after winning the ACC tournament, and they bowed out pretty early when they were a really popular Final Four pick. I wonder about that with Virginia Tech. So that's the only thing that gives me some pause there. But like all typical logic, like more in a vacuum thinking about that game, I would think that's a definite L for Texas. Virginia Tech team that's red hot. They're going to be super fired up to be playing there. And Texas they clearly have talent, but it just feels so much like a hollow kind of paper tiger Texas team that we've seen so many times over the years where they're going to get in, but I just don't feel great about them making a deep run and doing a lot of damage. I will say on the flip side of this, Chris Beard, who has taken a lot of heat here on this channel, who's taken a lot of heat from Tech fans, who has, I think deservedly so, taken a lot of heat throughout the league. He could completely flip the narrative with a run. He could completely flip the narrative of this season with a run. Because to me, up to this point, he's just been another example of an underperforming Texas coach. Like another example of a Texas coach like Shaka Smart, who comes in with all this hype. Texas coach like Charlie Strong, like Tom Herman, that comes in with all this hype in one of the 2 major sports and then kind of falls flat. And has teams that have plenty of talent, but never the toughness, grit, whatever it is, all the other ingredients that you need to actually be a good team and be a winning team. And it feels like that's the way that it's headed. But if Beard makes it to the second weekend here, if they get out, beat Virginia Tech, beat Purdue, and they get to the second weekend, that's a successful season. And I mean, this in some ways is the fallacy of how we judge teams in March Madness. I think there is too much weight put on this, but at the same time, like I completely understand it because there's nothing like the high anymore of the NCAA tournament. And as we get like further and further down this road where it feels like the product of college basketball is diminished and it means less and less in the grand scope of college athletics, it really is more and more like nobody pays attention. You know, the general public doesn't pay attention at all until March. So if that's the only thing, this is the only time of year where it's really taking center stage. And even today it's not, because freaking Tom Brady retires right during the aftermath of the selection show. But if this is like the only time anyone really cares, then it drives up the importance of that, right? It drives up the importance of the tournament and again continues to tip the scales like this way in terms of how much it matters versus the regular season. So Beard has an opportunity in front of him here. That's how I'd be viewing it if I were him. That's what I'd be telling my team. Like, we can completely reset the narrative, completely reset the narrative on what our season has been. Matt says, we have to talk about Beard. He called out his team and said he loves to win, and they don't. He then says his favorite moment in March was Little Rock. I'm glad you brought that up, Matt, because I was going there anyway. So thank you for the donation, and thank you for bringing that up. Texas Tech fans, you need to be laughing your you-know-what's off at Chris Beard. Yes, first post-game press conference after the Big 12 tournament, he had comments that I thought, it was like a putting your foot in your mouth kind of moment. I don't think it's the way that you coach kids or publicly talk about a team these days without it going over pretty poorly. Basically said, like, these guys don't know how to win yet. They don't know. His point was more about, like, they don't hate to lose. Like, I hate to lose. They don't hate to lose. And that's why they're losing games. And, like, I hate that. To me, I cringe at hearing that. Like, dude, shut up and coach them better. Teach them. Instill that in them. And that's like the problem at Texas. You can get talented kids in, but they're coming into this massive city with a ton to do. And a place I would love to live. Austin seems fun, but there's a lot of distractions there. And if you lose a basketball game, you can just head on down to 6th, go to Dirty 6th, and you're going to have a ton of fun. And you're going to let go of all your problems pretty easily there. And you're probably wildly talented, so you'll still go to the NBA. You can still do that and not have to pay. You just getting those kids to get to the point where they do hate losing as much as Chris Beard professes to is not going to be easy. That's a part of the job at Texas. That's like the main challenge of the job at Texas. And you had to know that upon taking over the job and leaving Texas Tech, where it's like the opposite. You're going to get that grit and toughness. And Beard had clearly developed that and turned a program into grit and toughness. You went to Texas, dude. You took the job at the country club program. Like that. This is what you deal with. If you take the job at the country club program, you're dealing with country club kids. And you have to figure out how to make them hate losing, and turn that thing around. And that's not happened. Beard clearly can recruit. All right, he got the talent in there. He utilized Texas's resources to get a bevy of talent in there out of the transfer portal. You've got to be the one to instill everything else in them. And so I hate hearing that comment where I roll my eyes and say, like, dude, you figure it out. That's your job. You're the one getting paid the money to do that. Don't like throwing the kids under the bus in that. And then the laughable moment is, yes, he gets asked on ESPN, like, what is your favorite NCAA tournament moment? And the guy that went to an Elite Eight and then a national championship game as the head coach of Texas Tech said that his favorite NCAA tournament memory and moment was the win that he had at Little Rock over Purdue when they had the upset win. Oh, how cute. That's beautiful, Chris. Get out of here, dude. You went to the Final Four in the national championship game with Texas Tech. That is such like Tech fans, you have just Chris Beard needs to be paying you rent. I mean, Beard makes a lot of money, so I'm sure it wouldn't be a problem for him to siphon off a nice rent payment to Lubbock, Texas. He needs to do it because that is another one of those moments. I said earlier this year when he was playing that game at Oklahoma where a fan called him a traitor, like an Oklahoma fan called him a traitor, and he stopped on his way out and like yelled something at the fan, like felt the need to respond to that. To me, I said, Tech fans, that's how you know you're living in this guy's head because he can't respond to you guys because it was either a home game where you took over like half the crowd or it was a game in Lubbock where, I mean, if he would have tried to do anything, he was probably going to get like quartered. Like his body probably would have been destroyed. So he couldn't. So he waits until the opportunity where it happens on the road where it's not a hostile crowd and the rest of the Oklahoma fans aren't going to jump in and do anything. You guys are in his head. And now here, he's not going to admit that his favorite moments were the two deep tournament runs that he had as the head coach of Tech. He's going to say it was Little Rock. I don't believe for a second that it was Little Rock. That's a cute story. That's great. I'm sure it was awesome early on in his career. Come on, man. You took Texas Tech to the national championship game. Laughable. You guys should have some fun with that, man. Tech fans, you have had the most unbelievable. I know it's a 3 seed. You didn't win the NCAA or the Big 12 tournament. And I know you've been to a Final Four here recently, but I just all the extenuating circumstances about this year and how it's played out, I just can't imagine it being much more fun. Like it's worked out about as well as it possibly could have. I hope you guys savor this. I hope you guys are savoring this in Lubbock because of the way it's all worked out and how much fun that has to be. Teresa, I see Chris Beard is cursed. I don't think Chris Beard is cursed. I think Texas is cursed. I think that's the problem. Like I seriously do. I made the joke like showing the vortex, like sucking away the powers of another coach. I really do feel like it's the problems that Texas has, like too much money almost, because it leads to too many cooks in the kitchen, too many people who have influence or think they have influence trying to pull you in one direction or the other. You also have the Longhorn Network. You have more BS media things that you have to do. You also are in Austin where there are so many distractions and the population has nearly doubled since Mac Brown first took the football job there. Like it's a different beast than it was back then. It's such a popular place for young kids all across the country to go live right now. It's just too much else going on. I just think you're fighting so many things that like that is the curse. Like Texas being as awesome as it is in a way, and you know why Texas fans puff out their chest and have the unearned arrogance that they do is because of the city. It's because of the money. It's because of all those things. It's because of the Longhorn Network that they were important enough to get their own network. But at the same time, that's like this thing that also eats at their success. So it's like Texas, you're kind of doing it to yourself. And I feel like that's another part of what's happening here with Beard. Another good point. Matt says their fans don't care about sports. Yeah, I mean, again, there's more to do around there. So it's a little more wine and cheese kind of a crowd. It's a more fickle crowd. It's not. That's why Beard spent half the season like busting his butt with gimmicks to try and get students actually there to the games. So yeah, I think all that stuff factors in. I think all of that is a part of what's going on here. Daniel, thank you for the donation. Sorry, I'm a little late getting to this. Daniel donates. Daniel says, you are right. Chris Mack would do well at K-State. Yeah, Chris Mack is definitely my number 2 at K-State. I was actually shocked when I went back and looked at his Xavier resume because I knew about him, obviously, and I knew he'd had success. Like I knew he was a good name. But he's one of those guys, like it was under the radar enough at Xavier that it didn't just come to mind like, oh my God, like look at this resume. I mean, that's the kind of higher, like K-State, you're just not going to get access to a guy with that accomplished of a resume unless it's in a scenario like this. So I'd be all for going and taking that chance. when they hired Bob Huggins back in 2006. He only stayed for 1 year because West Virginia, home, came calling. But he really jump-started the program, gave it a jolt of energy that it needed, obviously brought in Frank Martin. Genesis behind Michael Beasley coming there, Jacob Pullen, threw a bunch of life into that program. I feel like Chris Mack could do the same thing, even if he's not there for very long. And that is another part of this hiring process for K-State. Like Mack, Jerome Tang, those kind of guys are probably not going to be lifers at your job. If they succeed, if they do well, you'll probably be searching for a new head coach in another 3 or 4 years. But that to me is fine. I'm always of the opinion, like if they can come in and elevate the job and win you games, you use that for all it's worth, and it doesn't mean that it's all over. Because again, the Bob Huggins example is perfect. K-State would have known he was only going to come in 1 year on the front end. You probably don't hire him. But that would have been a mistake because that 1 year was worth so much more with everything that came after that. Like there were so many benefits that came after that. So my 2 cents there, I would say that that would be a very, very good hire. The last thing I want to get to you guys, because I told you I had a little bit of info here on the divisions with the Big 12. And by the way, if you want to sneak something in, I'm going to do like 3 or 4 more minutes here with you. If you want to sneak in a donation and get your question or comment up to the top, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something, and you can do so. But my friend Kellis Robinette, who was nice enough to come see me here when he was just a couple of blocks away at the Big 12 tournament, came over to my apartment, brought me some barbecue, some Slaps barbecue. Shout out to Kellis for that. That was very fun. But Kellis works for the Kansas City Star, covers K-State. He got the update that Big 12 ADs were discussing divisions this weekend while they were here for the Big 12 tournament. And he also threw this on top of it. He said, update, I'm told they looked at 3 different division models and couldn't settle on a favorite. All options are still on the table. Now, what I don't know from that is whether or not that means option 4 would be no divisions at all, which is what I really want. And I would hope that they're discussing just lock in your 3 rivals, your 3 teams that you're going to play every single year. Don't do divisions. Ensure that you get number 1 and number 2 in the Big 12 championship game every single year because please, 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 you need that. You cannot be dealing with the Big 12 of all leagues needs to be putting their best 2 and the most entertaining 2 and the best matchup in the championship game every single year. This year, perfect example of it, Baylor and Oklahoma State can draw. They can draw big, big numbers. They can draw 8-0 if there are stakes attached to it. And if they are the 2 best teams there, you got to do that. You got to do that. I'm with you, Nathan. I don't understand the obsession with divisions either. So I don't know. I took that as kind of a discouraging update. I'll say it's encouraging if they can't settle on a favorite. I mean, at least they're all looking at it right now and not coming to some consensus, being like, all right, we got it. This is what we're going to do. There doesn't appear to be any of that. But they're mulling over the divisions, and it still continues. It feels to me like it's still moving forward, and I don't like that they're moving forward with that idea. I think it needs to. You need to can it. Like the Big 12 finally is out in front of the rest of the leagues on something, which is with the divisions. Everybody else looking around like, oh, you guys actually kind of had this right by not doing divisions earlier. We want to join you. The Big 10 wants to join you, and then the second that happens, the Big 12 is going to revert back and say, like, no, we'll go play divisions. Frustrating. No one's letting me in that room. Somebody get this message to Bob Bowlesby. Somebody hears this, get the message to Bowlesby. You don't need divisions. Lock in 3 teams that you play every year and do the best by your conference. Don't feel like you're forced into divisions like you have to do that. There can be legislation to change that. Other conferences are on board. This is not the time to be reverting back right now. Not the time. Not the time, Bowlesby. I think that's going to wrap it up for me. Thank you guys so much for hanging out tonight. If your team made the NCAA tournament, if your squad is in, enjoy it, man. As a guy who has seen my team in the tournament a lot over the last 15 years, it sucks sitting here on a year where your team is not in. And for me, it's the 3rd straight year that my team is not in the NCAA tournament. So do not take it for granted. It's fun. It's a tremendous time in the sports calendar. It's one of the great things of being a college sports fan. Enjoy it. I'll be rooting for all of you unless you are Texas or Kansas. See ya.